Hey there, and welcome to the Vassals of Kingsgrave. In this podcast, we'll be reviewing and discussing the first season of USA's latest series, Mr. Robot. My name is Duncan, or Valkyrist on the forums, and joining me today in an abandoned Coney Island arcade is Matt.
Hey, this is Matt Varley on the forums.
And Adam.
Jon Snow on the forums.
Well, guys, thanks for coming. Before we jump into Lemoncake Ratings, I thought I might just give a brief synopsis to get us all reoriented back into the world of Mr. Robot. It's been a couple of weeks, but that's all right. So
we should probably have spoilers.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll do a spoiler tag at the beginning, yeah. Actually, I should ask, have you guys watched Fight Club? Because I mentioned that a lot.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's been out since '99, so come on.
Yeah.
I feel like spoiler warnings for stuff that's over a decade old is just like it happens, you know, like
That's true.
people can't get upset.
And it's one of those movies that's just like part of the cultural zeitgeist outside of the movies. You just Okay.
Yeah, so even people that haven't seen it, you know, have like a rudimentary knowledge of some of the concepts.
And if they haven't seen it, they don't care, and probably not listening to this podcast anyway.
True. Yeah. Okay. So, the series follows Elliot Alderson, a young man living in New York City who works as a security engineer at a cybersecurity company alongside his childhood friend Angela. Elliot struggles with social anxiety disorder, clinical depression, and even paranoid delusions. He tries to connect with people by hacking them, which often leads him to act as a cyber vigilante. Elliot is disgusted by what he regards as the mindless consumerism, social apathy, and capitalist greed of the world around him, and fantasizes about taking action. One day, he is approached by a mysterious insurrectionary anarchist called Mr. Robot, who attempts to recruit Elliot into the team of hacktivists known as fsociety. The primary mission of fsociety, Mr. Robot explains, is to cancel all debts by taking down one of the largest corporations in the world, E Corp. Elliot, however, knows them only as Evil Corp, due to the fact that his father, as well as Angela's mother, died of leukemia as a result of the company's lax safety regulations. He agrees to the mission and, along with the other members of F-Society, sets about destroying Evil Corp's databases and leading an anarchist revolution against the capitalist power structure. Opposing Elliot is the young and ambitious Tyrell Wellick, Evil Corp's Vice President of Technology, who will do anything to further his career. Elliot manages to evade Tyrell's suspicions, but gradually comes to realize that Mr. Robot is not all that he seems. Okay, so what did we think of the first season? Matt, do you want to kick us off with Lemoncake Ratings? Or I was trying to think of something other than lemon cakes. Maybe like, what was it, Raspberry Pies? That hack title? Yeah. Raspberry Pi Ratings.
All right, so I'll give it a 4.9 out of 5 Raspberry Pis. I think it was pretty close to perfect. And it's so good that I'm concerned about season 2 and where it'll go. But I enjoyed everything about it. The pacing was amazing. Like, the story was amazing. The characters were well developed. Like, even like the tertiary, like, other members of F Society that like get 2 lines per show, maybe you still knew, you just got them. I liked it very much.
Yeah, 4.9. So I'll just give it a 5 out of 5. Just overall, like, grading on a bit of a curve because it's USA and everything. Like, it's nothing's perfect, but I was completely satisfied. Like you said, the casting was really good. Everyone's likable, like the actors, even the characters that aren't supposed to be likable. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Everyone plays their part really well. It's nice to see Christian Slater in something that'll probably get a second season. I really enjoyed it. Even though like the twist kind of I had figured out very early, I also didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean there's suspicions like throughout the whole series of what's real and what's not.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, I think I watched the first 2 episodes together, and right away I was like, this feels Fight Club as hell to me, and I was just like, and then I started watching like, is anyone ever talking to them both in the same place at this, and they were very good about editing that, but I figured it's gonna end up that this is a figment of his imagination, but I also did not figure like, oh well, this person is his father. Like, that was just not registering in my head at all.
Yeah. Right. And it sets up a really nice conceit where just in the beginning, every time someone says E-Corp, his brain autocorrects it to Evil Corp. So like right at the beginning, you see that reality is slightly distorted for him. and it just kind of extrapolates from there. And like the Fight Club thing, I don't actually think they really try and hide it that much. So that it wasn't a twist in the way that it was with Fight Club. I think it was more just like the last piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, it was pretty telegraphed, but I think it was more of kind of like a case study. You know what I mean? Like his mental illness and his problems, and then why all that came about, and the reveal of his family, and
yeah, definitely. Yeah, so for me, I guess Mr. Robot pretty much had me hooked in the first 10 minutes. A lot of my favorite shows seem to have ended in the past year, so it was really exciting to stumble across something like this. On a technical level, I think the show does a really great job at creating tense scenes and like really unique, evocative imagery. On a performance level, I think Rami Malek completely draws you into Elliot's mindset, and he makes you see the world through his distorted eyes, and he makes you feel that sense of anxiety and intense paranoia of the character. And finally, on a writing level, I think the creator, Sam Esmail, I think it is exploring a lot of ideas that really fascinate me.
Right.
Yeah. Just the ideas of like the invasion of technology into our daily lives, and the way technology shapes our perception of reality, and the way it can be used to both sort of liberate us on F-Society side and enslave us on Evil Corp's side. The one aspect I was sort of mixed about is how heavily it draws inspiration from other works, like the fact that it uses Fight Club and The Matrix and American Psycho as its muse is something like initially I was like really positive, like that really drew me into the show, but I found that because it often borrowed really heavily, that it sort of struggled to become its own thing at times, and often fell into cliches and forecast certain plot points, like the real nature of Mr. Robot. However, I think that the characters, as you say, Matt, were generally fleshed out enough and well written enough and well cast enough that it managed to transcend that. So I'll give it 4.5 Raspberry Pis out of 5. Sorry, are you guys linking something? Is this an article?
What is it? Oh, Evil Corp Enron. Yeah, I got that too.
Yeah. It's the
like they steal, they borrow from reality, they borrow from fiction, just kind of blatantly, and for the most part, I think it really works.
Yeah, it's a really pointed sort of criticism at times. It also, the Enron, the Evil Corp logo also looks a lot like the Dell logo.
Yeah, because it's on every computer and everything.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it really sort of breaks that fourth wall and incorporates real life into the experience. And as we mentioned before, the fact that it uses the titles of the episodes evoke like Pirate Bay torrenting sort of titles like .mkv and .move and all that. Like that's sort of a cool kind of poking fun at the ways people consume media these days.
Yeah, especially considering this was like on every streaming service as well. So it's like literally you can pirate this whole thing, binge watch it, or you could watch it on USA.
Yeah, like the whole system is changing and people are sort of running to catch up. All right, cool. So let's get into our main discussion. I had a lot of trouble trying to structure how we might actually talk about the show because there's just so many ideas and references buzzing around the show, and the structure is sort of all over the place. It's kind of hard to get it straight at times, but I figure we could just sort of address each character and then sort of pick out themes as we go. Let's start with the heart of the show, Elliot himself. So, in many ways, I thought Elliot was a very typical sort of cyberpunk protagonist because he's a loner, he's an outcast, he's a misfit, and his view of reality is often filtered through computer screens. And he regards modern society as this sort of collective delusion in which technological comforts are used to distract us from the fact that we no longer have any real choices other than the choice of what to buy, and our lives are determined by corporations. And he's also very socially anxious and deeply paranoid of the world around him, which leads him to close off emotionally and to create an imaginary friend to confide in, which is us, the audience. What did you guys think of Elliot?
Yeah, he's definitely really complex. Like, I would like to see maybe season 2 go into his childhood a little more, because you see like flashbacks with him and his mom, and his mom seems kind of brutal. And then you see like the flashback with him and his father, and the first time you like see him as a young person, he's stealing money. So I don't know if he was like delinquent from like day one, or
that's a good point.
How that kind of developed.
Yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes he's kind of off-putting, but that's what made him really a good character. And in the first episode, he's just kind of, I mean, he's this weird borderline kind of like, you know, on the spectrum type guy, you know, right? And you're thinking like, well, what, you know, what's he up to? But he's out there, you know, doing justice kind of, and, you know, sort of just as Elliot, right? And I think that's something that, you know, he's still got to go to his 9 to 5 and everything, but I think that's something that really, you know, can appeal to a lot of people. And, you know, he's still got that anxiety. He's still kind of a bit of a shut-in, which I'm sure a lot of us have had at some point in our lives. So most of what we know about him gets developed in the last few episodes. But I think he remains the hero, more or less.
Sort of, yeah. I don't know, because that's the thing he says. Like when Tyrell asks, "Why did you do this?" and he says, "I wanted to be the hero." But it's like that's such a loaded sort of answer. And I agree, Adam. He is a protagonist that's often very unlikable and downright creepy.
Right.
And
For sure.
He breaches. Well, the conceit is that he has some form of mental illness, like Asperger's or something, or he can't really connect with people or understand people. So he uses computers to understand them, and he hacks into their personal details and their personal accounts and their social media
Their
to try
online
and make
life.
sense of people. Yeah. The only reality he trusts is the reality that he derives from computers. Like that's what he sees people are as ones and zeros, as bits of data
He feels
that he can piece together.
He feels
like
that's
a
the most
puzzle.
raw.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then he does stuff like with his therapists and the guy that she was seeing that was actually married or whatever. And then like that's pretty bad. But like, I don't blame that guy for like going to the cops later on, right? Like,
Right. No, and he's also very estranged and like singular, shut in, like you said, but he's also fiercely loyal. If you think about it, like to his therapist, he's like, oh, she's getting screwed over. I gotta stop this. You know, Angela's getting screwed over. Gotta stop this. Shayla. Oh, poor Shayla. But I mean, the people that are close to him, he genuinely cares about, and like, you know.
and with the therapist though, wasn't part of that where he was like, you know, she can't really focus on me because of this other guy or whatever. Like, wasn't that part of his motivation too?
Yeah, there is a selfish aspect to it where, you know, he doesn't like Angela's boyfriend, so he wants to get rid of her, or Angela's spending too much time with the boyfriend and not enough with him, and the therapist is too distracted.
Yeah, but he's feeding the therapist bullshit anyway, so I don't get why he would care.
That's true, yeah, of course.
That's a good point.
The question is sort of, is he creepy and wants to invade people's privacy, and then he simply rationalizes it by saying, okay, I'm going to do moral, you know, good things, I'm going to right wrongs with this power? Or does he generally have a sense of morality and he wants to use his skills to do good?
Well, I mean, as we find out, he does. You know, he created fsociety for the, you know, one reason, to free everyone from just one kind of enslavement, and that was financial. So I think,
but it's also
overall,
a very different sense of morality, right?
Because at one point you're stealing from a company, you know, that he has justified it as a company as already stolen from everyone, you know, ever. So I don't know. I think in the end he does things obviously for kind of selfish motives, but they end up being best for everyone involved. You know, like the therapist could have gone on living that, you know, dream that, you know, she just met this really great guy and didn't know he had, like, you know, a number of other dating profiles on top of the fact that he was married and apparently a dick to his dog. So like, even save the dog.
Did you notice though with that guy how they slipped the Ashley Madison hack in there?
Oh yeah.
Like at the end, like which was only I was that's
like
what I was
weeks
trying to
before.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like what's the lead time on these episodes, because I'm like that was like right before that episode came out. It must have been like they were like shot that scene extra, or they were like wrapping it up when that came down and like added that line in there or something.
I was trying to see if it was like dubbed over, like his head was turned, but he actually was in the scene saying it.
But that's part of how they like bring you into that world. Like they use real stuff.
Going back to the decision to expose his therapist to what her boyfriend's doing, I think a big theme for Elliot is this idea that we're all living in this delusion, and he wants to like bring truth to the world. But he understands that when you tell the truth, it's often very scary and people don't like it. Like when his therapist keeps pushing him to like, open up, tell me the truth. And he finally lays bare who he is, what he does with his time, that he's hacked her accounts and poured over all of these very personal details about her. And she's horrified. So often the truth is something that he needs to keep to himself because people don't want to hear the truth.
Right. And that's like the, you know, Matrix inspiration where like, you know, he sees the Matrix, you know.
I mean, they literally, I mean, in the first episode, Mr. Robot says something that's almost word for word what Morpheus says. It's like, you sense something's wrong about the world, something that no one else can see. Yeah, so it's definitely the Matrix is a big influence. This fact that he can see the real configurations of power in the world and no one else can, and he wants to open their eyes to them. But the people are actually very dependent on these configurations. The comfort and the distraction that technology provides for people. We've become so dependent on it that we'll actually fight to protect it, even though ultimately it might be hurting us or sort of degrading what we are as humans.
We see that a lot in real life too. Just a lot of people that fight for these corporations and their rights, to be considered a human or to do things that, we all agree, well, it's not really good, but we want them to have the right to do that. So one day when I'm the CEO or I'm, the rich guy in billionaire company, I can do whatever I want, and no one ever gets to that point, right? But still, millions of people are willing to protect that system. Like I'm not like trying to like say that's necessarily good or bad, but it's like not in your self-interest, right?
I mean, it's complicated because like we need infrastructure, and the fact that I need to use my phone every day, so I have to pay Verizon every month. And some people think that the consolidation of power into one corporation, into a monopoly, that's why we have anti-monopoly stuff, it's a double-edged sword, really, because if we break up these companies, then what if their service goes down or something like that,
Yeah, and that's kind of the hypocrisy in Elliot's philosophy. Like, he wants to, he sees the way people interact with each other as ultimately artificial and false and filtered. But he himself is so dependent on things like the internet and technology to survive. That's the only way he understands the world. So,
yeah.
Like, maybe subconsciously he realizes how negative that is, and he wants to rip that away from himself as well as the world, because he sees how isolating and alienating that system is.
Well, there were a few scenes definitely where it was like, it kind of reminded me again, we go back to the Matrix of like, like Cypher when he's sitting there, they're staring at the green text and he's like, I don't even see the code anymore. All I see is blonde, brunette. You know what I mean? There are a few scenes where it just seems like he's not seeing like what we're seeing on the screen,
Yep.
Like he's interpreting it all. He knows all the little ins and outs. But but even at the end of that, we're left with like in that final episode, they're like, well, what's the point? What's next? Even all the F Society members like, oh, well, what do we do now? Like they hadn't thought too much about it. We're about to not have, maybe the TVs are going to be down forever. Maybe
right.
What's going to happen?
Hopefully they took out all their cash, because they can't use their cards anymore.
They're stockpiling cash and gold and.
Yeah. And I love that because it completely subverts the end of Fight Club, where it's this huge momentous occasion where the buildings are literally collapsing on the skyline, and here it's like we don't even see the collapse. The next episode and it's already happened, and there's no sort of celebration. It's ultimately hollow. The F Society members are saying, well, what next? What do we do now? What's our actual plan for a new world now that we've ripped down the old world?
And it also, as far as power structures go, it goes from conventional to non-conventional, because even still he's beholden to like the drug cartels and stuff like that, like these illegal like power structures, because he needs to get his drugs, like, and then that develops into its own story.
Definitely, yeah. It's a theme it shares with Breaking Bad is like unintended negative consequences that stem from sort of altruistic things. So he'll try and do a good thing like protect Shayla from this horrible drug dealer, but it actually ends up killing her.
Yeah, and that was a really cool. When I first thought about it, I was like, "That's a weird, like, little side story to add." But in the end, he accomplished what he meant to set out to do. But also, how many prisoners escaped, like causing what damage later on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was not a net good, really.
I've put Shayla. I do want to talk a little bit about Shayla, so I've put her further down because that's an interesting storyline.
Yeah.
But just with Elliot. There's a great scene, I think it's in episode 3, where he decides to be like a normal person. Like, that's his overwhelming desire. He's very much torn between wanting to destroy the world and wanting to belong to the world and to fit into the world. And he has this epiphany where he's like, I'm going to be normal. I'm going to be good. I'm going to go to the gym. Shayla can be my girlfriend. I'm going to drink, mocha lattes. Drink Starbucks. But it makes such a mockery of the viewer. Like, the way we live our lives is just the way he pretends to, the way he performs our lives almost creates like this mask of superficial happiness that we wear every day.
Yeah, it was a very interesting episode, but yeah, it's funny how being normal could be parodied so bad in that instance.
I do want to ask, what did you guys think of the narration or the voiceover sort of conceit of the show? I found it very very similar to Dexter. I don't know if you guys have watched that show.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah, because
exactly.
it
That
is a
inner
very
monologue of
yeah, like the actual tone
this.
of it is very
Yeah, the
droning, and
tone.
it's like a
Yeah.
psychopath trying to discern the world.
I have to smile now and react this way because this is how people react to this.
Hmm.
Not how I would react, but
Yeah, it's
this
almost
is
like
how I have to be normal.
an anthropologist trying to like fit in with the natives, only the natives are like
Right.
humanity.
Yeah.
And also the conceit that he's using his shady powers to sort of right wrongs, and he goes around in a hoodie and tries to, yeah, get rid of bad guys. But he has this sort of vicarious thrill in penetrating people's private lives and manipulating them and things like that.
Yeah, because what was the first? Was it the first episode? Was like the guy with like the that had like a bunch of child porn or something?
That was what an amazing opening scene to like grab the viewer.
Yeah, and I was like, well, is there going to be like there wasn't as much of that as I kind of expected, but it definitely it shows us the kind of character he is, and then it makes the fact that he is the driving force behind all of this make a bit more sense, but also at the same time, like we see why he probably had to compartmentalize it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because this is less cut and dry than like I'm exposing pedophiles. Like,
Well, it also like as far as like the Dexter influence did that as well, where Dexter had like a kill of the week, but like it was all part of this like grand overarching storyline. So he kind of has his little hack that he has to do every week, but like in the end, it's a greater like F-Society story arc.
maybe next season we'll start off with him as a lumberjack.
Awesome.
Spoilers for Dexter. I think the narration is very evocative of movies like Taxi Driver and Clockwork Orange, where we're in the mind of a fairly disturbed individual and we're very much seeing the world through their eyes. And as we mentioned, the world sort of autocorrects to their interpretation and their subjectivity. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting relationship that the audience has with Elliot, because rather than Frank Underwood in House of Cards, where he's sort of bringing us into his confidence, it's really chummy and it's sort of this fun ride.
Right. He breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah. Elliot's sort of really needy and desperate and distrustful of us, the viewer. So it's much more of a dialogue, I guess.
Well, it's more like he feels like a need to explain himself. This is what's going on. Like, this is why I do this. So it's not so much of those like comic asides like House of Cards, where he's just like turns around, this guy's a dick, and then like starts talking to him like anyway. But I feel like really he's trying to explain his world and vision. It's the same as Dexter, like get us on board with like, okay, this is how he thinks and we get it.
We're almost like a moral sort of mechanism where he's trying to bounce ideas off us to figure out what's right and what's the right thing to do in the situation. Should he tear down the world, or should he try and fit in and embody what it's like to be normal and make relationships, or should he disappear into a computer and wreck everything? And in many respects, we come to realize that we're almost like Mr. Robot. We're a figment of his imagination. We're another sort of object of his paranoia.
Right. And you really get that because you think it's just a kind of like narrative device, until like you realize that he's actually bad shit. Like,
I think at the end of the first episode, when Tyrell brings him into his office, Elliot literally turns to the camera and saying, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Which is just like a great sort of thematic sentence. And I think my favorite bit was, I think it's in episode 9 when he realizes that Darlene is his sister, and he gets onto the train and he grabs the camera and starts shaking it and saying, "Were you in on this?" Yeah. Like, that is so cool. Like, we're so complicit in this whole experience because we know things before he does.
Yeah, that was a big twist. I didn't see that coming.
That was like, how did he not figure that out? But I guess he didn't have too much information on them. But wasn't he actively trying to figure out the F Society members?
I don't think he was, because I think he probably did that like off camera before the season started.
Yeah, I have no idea how the mechanics of F Society works, because like when he first comes into the building, everyone greets him like they've never met him before.
Right. And then there's one scene where it's just Christian Slater trying to get the black dude back on board. That was like, wait a minute, how does this scene exist?
Well, I assumed that was Elliot. Like
Whoa.
whenever it's
Yeah,
Mr.
yeah.
Robot talking to someone, it's Elliot talking to someone. So I
Oh,
think
right.
I think it's that whenever Elliot and Mr. Robot are in the same room, people are either addressing Elliot and ignoring Mr. Robot, or addressing Mr. Robot and ignoring Elliot. So that's when Elliot is projecting into Mr. Robot.
Yeah, and what we saw like somewhat clearly is during that scene where he's fighting himself, and sometimes he's across the room, and then he's like, oh no, I'm like, his body is actually Mr. Robot's off doing something and he's watching it.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is brilliant. But I think in that first episode when they come in and they sort of all just kind of, they're not like, hey boss or anything, maybe that's just not the dynamic, or maybe that was the dynamic and he's like, no, that's not how we do it or something, and he's just set up ground rules that make it ambiguous enough that it wouldn't tee him off or whatever, because clearly Mr. Robot knows this is going on, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the only thing I can think of is that he and Darlene basically set this up, and Darlene recruited the members of fsociety, and that was the first time he was introduced to them.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But yeah,
it could be.
That scene in the Starbucks was like so ripped out of Fight Club, like the security footage of the protagonist and Tyler Durden just fighting in the car park, and it's just the protagonist throwing himself around. The one scene that I can't figure out is when Tyrell Wellick and Mr. Robot are sitting in a car talking together. Like, I have no idea what is going on there, but maybe we can save that till the Tyrell discussion in a bit.
Yeah, Tyrell Wellick is
he's his own
great
thing.
character, and he deserves his own time.
So, any thoughts on the final couple episodes when the big reveal's coming, and it's very much like the dam is broken and all these repressed memories about his family come flooding back, like that, as you mentioned earlier, Matt, that family dynamic, the abuse he suffered at the hands of his mother, and his relationship with his father, about what's right and wrong, is plays a big role in those final couple episodes.
Right. So, like with his father, when we were talking about his morality, the scene where we see him stealing, it's like, well, he's a dick, so it doesn't matter. So, if someone's a dick and deserves it, like, they can get robbed, or they deserve whatever's coming to them.
Yeah, it's a very sort of instinctual idea of what's right and wrong. It's not rules necessarily. It's what's the situation? How did this guy interact with me? Does he deserve my respect? And I guess we get the origins of Mr. Robot. That's the name of the electronics store that his father ran, which eventually got bought out by Evil Corp. Evil Corp just kind of absorbing everything in the world, like this gigantic Cthulhu-like creature. Nice. But I do love all the 90s nostalgia, like especially that scene where it's just surrounded by 90s era computers, and the guy has to come in to get his mouse fixed, and and they look in they're going to go see a movie, and they go, Pulp Fiction, oh, that sounds interesting, let's go watch that. Like, I love that.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the world building where like they do use shit like Pulp Fiction, Starbucks, we hacked into his like Match.com accounts and his Facebook, and it's just like, okay, this is our world, like I use Facebook, I go to Starbucks, like I think it really helps create the whole like fucked up reality.
Yeah, and it sort of reminds me of something we talked about in one of the book clubs. I think it was the Ready Player One discussion, where everything in these characters, all their thoughts is mediated not through history. It's all movies and media and pop cultural references. That's how they see the world, and that's what they draw on. And that's what the show itself draws upon. It's not drawing on history, it's drawing on, movie references and paying homage to this sort of pastiche of 90s pop culture.
Nostalgia, yeah.
That's kind of how we've become, like, in real life, a lot of us, especially, of a certain generation. But, we have so much more going on nowadays, right? And it used to be, if there was a TV show, everyone watched it, right? Because there were only a few TV shows, so everyone would sort of remember that. But then you had books, you had to dig into history. And that was kind of, what you went through. And now it's like there's just so much more current stuff. A lot of people, their timeline doesn't go that far back. And I think the big difference now is like you get people that they'll have a quote or something that's become like a pop culture reference, like we talked about Fight Club, right? There are elements of that have just become part of pop culture, and people will pull quotes or put elements into something, and then maybe they've never even seen the movie, right? And they're doing like a second, third-hand reference. That's sort of kind of where we've become, I think, as a society.
Yeah, those are our stories. Like in previous generation, they had myths, then they had historical accounts, and now we have
Yeah.
popular culture, movies that sort of
Like King
redraw.
Arthur's and Robin Hood and all that lasted for so long because that there wasn't things didn't disseminate as easily, right?
Hmm.
And now it's just anyone can put anything out.
And you can sort of,
And if
I guess you can sort of mock it as being superficial, but there is like obviously truth that is resonating with people in some of these works.
Right. I mean, I just think it's like an evolution of memory that this is the world we live in. Like, what else are we supposed to like point a time to? Like, I remember being on the phone with my girlfriend in like 8th grade, like when Ross and Rachel first kissed. Like, so like I get it, but you have people say like, play it again, Sam, and they don't know it was never actually said in Casablanca, but they know it's a thing that people say.
Yeah.
Again, it's like the evolution, like King Arthur and everything, because everything was verbal and
Yeah.
anything that was written down was like painstakingly written down. And then the printing press, so like, democratization of like information really started taking off.
Yeah, definitely. It couldn't be kept safe by the elite. But I think it's the sort of a danger in the sense that it sort of isolates us and makes us unmoored from history and heritage, and we don't really know what to do. There's no sort of set path about how we're supposed to act or what we're supposed to do. And Mr. Robot kind of argues that corporations kind of take advantage of that. They've created this new system in how you're supposed to live, buy and buy and buy and buy, and your only choice is which item to buy, which product to buy.
They've created their system and implemented it onto us.
Yeah.
Like,
man.
Yeah. But I think that also, like, when you said like we all feel more isolated, it's like every other system before like the printing press took how many thousands of years? Verbal histories have been around forever. Like, our brains get that. I think now our brains just get so overloaded that like we're getting stuff like shot at us like, every day, that we can't biologically process that much information yet.
Yeah, it's information overload. There's so much visual sensory stuff that we're being bombarded with that we can't even process it. We just become, as Elliot said, numb. We become numb to it, and when we're numb, we do what we're told.
Right.
And the printing press is a cool example because a lot of backlash to that was the fact that it would, and same thing with photography and like reproductions of images, it sort of took away from the original. Like, the original no longer had this kind of special aura about it, the fact that it was handcrafted and someone poured their love and their creativity. Now things can just be copied and, emulated and distributed all over the world, and that's kind of what information technology is. Anything, there's no original anymore. It's just copies of copies of copies of copies. It's just this remix of everything that's come before, and there's nothing original. And like,
which is
sort
like
of
a very platonic philosophy that like the further and further we get away from like the truth.
Yep.
With all these replications, everything is getting further away from the truth. It's a shadow on the wall.
Definitely. With
can't
every
stop
copy,
the signal.
With every copy we lose something of the original, and it sort of breeds this sense of atomization and isolation in modern day individuals.
To me, like, the fact that it's getting a second season is what has me the most excited. I want to see where it's going. I want to see if they can somehow, make something useful. Because I mean, we've sort of already reached the end point, right? Is how it feels. Like, this is the like Fight Club. This was the end of the movie. So what now?
Yeah, there was no Fight Club 2.
Yeah, maybe they do it. Maybe they can do it justice. Maybe they can't. But I'm excited to see them try, and I hope a lot of that's going to be more in-depth study into what makes Elliot tick.
Yeah. And I like how it's not just spectacle. It is about these characters. It's about what Elliot is going through emotionally, and him processing his family, and how the final scene we get is like, we'll never leave you. We'll always be a part of you. You can't delete us. So he's going to have to sort of reconcile with that and try and evolve from it or whatever. But anyway, we're running a bit long. We should probably move on to a few other characters. So Angela. So I actually found myself becoming really interested in Angela's journey towards the end, which is odd because in the beginning she's fairly ordinary. She's sort of this goody two-shoes. She's ambitious and career-minded, but also kind and innocent. And she has this hilariously lame boyfriend who always made me smile.
Who wanted to be buddies with Elliot so much.
Yeah.
That was the best part. He'd be like, hey, buddy.
And like Angela, she's sort of doing everything she's supposed to and to succeed in the world, and yet she sort of feels miserable and unfulfilled, and that's kind of how she changes. So, like, what did you guys think of Angela?
I dug her character. When she goes to work at E Corp, it's kind of weird. But then that last episode, we see a bit of when she's what is it? When she's like getting the shoes or whatever, and the guy's like, "How can you work for these people?" Like you hear what, that's like sort of her moment, where it's like, so what kind of person I am, and she's like, yeah, go get me the other shoes, bitch. And it's kind of like, ooh, like, is that just like a visceral reaction of like this guy attacking her, and she really has barely worked there, and she's like, what the fuck? Or is she maybe kind of like moving a little to the dark side? Like, I don't know. Like, I liked that little change there, but I don't know. I thought she was one of the most likable characters all season.
Well, it's almost like she's been sort of kicked around this whole season and made to feel small, and she's sick of that. And it is partly a defense mechanism, like, who are you to judge me? I'm just trying to get by. But also, no, I'm not inferior to anymore. I'm going to assert myself and, all that.
And maybe the combination of that conversation she had with the, was it the CEO? That, and then the way that the shoe salesman is talking to her, maybe this sort of makes her realize, like, oh, you know what, I kind of am in a position of power even with everything that's going on, and like, you know what, I'm gonna own it for a minute. Like, maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, I really love that scene because it made me think that, like, she's like, okay, so I could be righteous and be putting shoes on people's feet, or I could be in the position I am and, like, deal with everything that goes with that. She kind of like saw the Matrix and was like, well, if this is what it takes to be successful, I can be a bitch.
Well, yeah, she sort of sees the class divisions, and she's saying, well, if I'm not the person getting the shoes put on my foot, then I'm the person putting the shoes on someone else's foot, and I don't want to be that anymore.
Or I'm the person who loses their mother compared to the person that does not, like.
Exactly, yeah. That there's sort of no middle ground, which is, I think, something Darlene says. There used to be this middle ground, this middle class. Now there's just the poor and the rich, and it's becoming hostile between them. You get these little microcosms of rich people and poor people just sort of squaring off, and the sense that they both feel a sense of empowerment. The wealthy have this established power, but the poor people have this promise of revolution that Elliot has created.
Yeah, for sure. So, did anyone else like really feel bad when Angela goes into Elliot's room and Shayla's there naked and like she didn't know, like they weren't even dating? Quoting, air quoting,
Well,
I was like, oh, bummer, man.
She wanted to watch Back to the Future with him.
Yeah,
that's so sad. I really like their friendship, but you don't really see any of it. It's like like as soon as we get in, it immediately starts to disintegrate. So yeah.
Right, and there was always like. It was towing the line of like, is this like going to be like the romantic relationship in the story? Like, because obviously he didn't like the boyfriend, but did he not like him because she was going out with him, or did he not like him because, well, he was a douche? But
I'm glad they never went that way though. It is more like a sister relationship, and in a lot of ways, it's Elliot's...
Yeah, but he tried to kiss his sister.
That's true. Yeah, he's got that Lannister thing going on. Yeah. But in a lot of ways, it's Elliot's empathy towards her and the way she's sort of exploited and swimming in debt at the beginning, and the fact that she also lost a parent to corporate greed, that serves as his primary motivation to join fsociety. Like, that's really the main thing that stirs him. He is discontent with the world in general, but it's more of an abstract idea, whereas Angela puts a face on that suffering at the beginning, which is ironic that she eventually becomes part of that evil machine. And I think on one side, maybe there's a sense that, I can maybe change things from the inside. I can make sure that other mothers don't die. But on another side, she is being sort of seduced by the CEO, the power and the self-worth that he instills in her.
Yeah, I think that was her main motivation, was to affect change from within rather than, being the person that keeps on getting shit on.
I think one of the things that changes her, again coming back to Shayla, is the scene where she and Shayla kiss in like this, it's like, is it the underground of a club or something?
Yeah, they're on the like E too, they're rolling.
Yeah, the way the scene is shot is amazing because it's like light and shadow flittering across their faces, and there's like a mirror behind them. And I think in the prior scene, Angela finds out that her boyfriend is cheating on her, but she sort of accepts it and resigns to the fact that she's going to have to take him back. But after that night, I think I'm getting the timeline right. After that night, she says, "Nah, you're dropped. You're done." So I think that was, even though Shayla is only a small character, that her sense of like rebellion and freedom. And
Shayla also tells her, like when they're looking in the mirror, like, you are the only person that matters to you. Like, do what's best for you.
Yeah.
And that kind of empowers her, even though, like, her life's going through the shitter.
Yep, it seems like a turning point in Angela's development, and not wanting to be a doormat anymore, and not having to be like the perfect, proper sort of girl, and being no, I want to do what I feel like doing, what gives desire to me, and all that. And that's when she dumps her boyfriend, and then she pursues this lawsuit against Evil Corp, sort of asserting herself and her past pain. And it's through that lawsuit, along with her desperation over losing her job, that actually leads her into the wolf's den.
She's an example of like a character completely different from Elliot that we all get. Like she was so well developed and well written that like it's just a great character. Like, and it's completely different from every other character on the show. Again, they just nailed it.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what her journey is next season. Yeah, the big scene for her at the end was witnessing that executive's televised death, and the blood sort of splattering on her shoes, which is sort of the beginning of her corruption, I guess.
Yeah, that was pretty brutal.
Yeah, that was horrific. And I think they delayed the episode airing because of the murders of 2 journalists on television. Is that right?
Yeah, because of that shooting in was it Virginia, where the anchor went up and just
Yeah,
he just went up and shot those 2 people as they were reporting, which I don't know, I didn't realize, because like I said, I watched them a little behind, and so I went to watch that episode, and it was like, we're showing you last week's episode. I was like, oh, so I had to go hunt it down on demand, but. And it had been a couple weeks, so I had to remember, like, wait, which shooting was it that this was about? Like,
but it is.
We have so many.
It's a very disturbing scene. Like, there's no discretionary cutaway or anything. You see the gun click and the blood explode.
It's like the Shawshank Redemption when the warden offs himself. Like, you just see it.
And even more sort of creepy is how, as everyone's screaming, it sort of zooms in on the silent camera lens that he was talking into. And it's like, everyone just saw that, and we're all sort of infected by that panic and that fear and that horror. So that
camera lens, that's how this scene opened, right? Like, that was a cut from when Elliot was talking to the wife, and it like he was outside, and she was like, "Oh, have you seen my husband?" That scene where they meet in front of the house. And he's like, oh, yeah, I saw him the other day. And he's like, well, really? Well, I haven't seen him in like 3 days, so where is he? Sort of thing. And he was like, oh, I got to get out of here. And then it cut to that. And I initially thought, like, oh, someone's across the street, like, surveilling them or something.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then we had the shot of that. And then it pulled out, and we're like, oh, okay, this is like a conference room. And like, so I didn't really see that coming, because I was immediately thinking, like, something else was going on.
Yeah. Well, I think it also brings up how we real life versus like something we just observed on the screen. This like the camera was the medium that projected that reality to everyone else that wasn't in the room, that didn't get blood on their shoes.
Exactly. Yeah. Other people saw a replication of that image. Angela actually saw it up close. She smelled the gun smoke. She felt the blood splatter against her shoes. It's the difference between reality and sort of virtual reality, I guess. I think that's all I had to say on Angela. Do we want to talk about Tyrell Wellick?
Oh, do we?
Yeah, so in many respects, Tyrell is Elliot's nemesis throughout the season. He's a ruthless capitalist who gleefully strips away his humanity and commits vile acts in order to advance his career up the Evil Corp ladder. He displays open contempt for the poor and working class, and is even seen beating a homeless person after he pays him in order to vent his frustrations and sadistic rage. So, you liked Tyrell, Matt?
I did. I found his character, again, another very interesting character. So my girlfriend got me into the show, and I was like, so at what point do we have the conversation that whatever I'm doing to get like more power, whether it be like sleeping with other women, sleeping with other men,
Yeah, like what's the deal?
The couple dynamic? Yeah, exactly. Like that was very interesting. Like just him in general relating to Elliot, being like, oh yeah, so you must be using this program like in their first meeting, and then just seeing him become more power hungry, and then like entering that meeting where Elliot's like, are you seeing this?
Well, what I love is how powerful he seems at first, and how powerful he really isn't. I mean, he's an executive at one of the largest corporations in the world, but he comes in and he's like this ominous character right away, and you're like, okay, this, is he on to them? What's going on? And then when he brings Elliot in, and he's like, yeah, I want you to be my new, I'm going to be the CTO, buddy. And like, I'm like, oh, well, this is already set, man. This guy is going to be like running the corporation, and something's going to, no. that's not the way it went.
But that scene is interesting because he makes such a extravagant display of power with all of
With
these
the lawyers
black
and everything.
silhouetted lawyers
Right.
surrounding him and him being the only light figure. But then when Elliot says no, he just kind of goes to the corner of the room and looks down like a little scolded child and says, "No, I just thought I'd ask." So it is this, it is his impotence.
Yeah, he does that too after he's passed over. Like the two guys, like they're cracking jokes in his office, and he fires them both.
Yeah.
It's like minimal severance package, and like just like little petty displays of power. It's like, okay, this guy's got power enough to fire these guys, but like he's also just
he's not getting what he wants.
And that reminded me a lot of Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, where he's just fuming with rage over these petty office politics and perceived slights. And he's got this perfect suit and this perfect hair, but it's all concealing this kind of
Perfect
bubbling
card.
cruelty.
Right.
And a kind of cruelty that sort of thrives in this amoral sort of corporate setting. In particular, the beginning of episode 3 felt very American Psycho, where he's looking into this like six-sided mirror and he's rehearsing his interview and he's sort of ritualistically putting on this mask for the day.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that the episode where he like comes home after the end of the day and his wife is all tied up? And he's like, I don't want to do this tonight.
Oh, that's where
Yeah.
he sleeps with. He goes to a gay club and he sleeps with another employee, I guess, to get some dirt on him or to like hack his phone or something. And then he comes home and his wife's like, "Yeah, I want some tonight."
The only thing missing there is like a big pile of cocaine somewhere. Like,
Yeah. Tony Montana style.
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna rise to the top pretty quickly, you know.
But yeah,
Amazing.
that relationship, like, what the fuck? Like, go into the bathroom after, like, the new CTO's wife is in there and try to, like, seduce her. It's a very interesting dynamic, but I don't get it. Like, it's so alien to me. I'm like, seriously, like, I asked my girlfriend, I was like, when do you have that conversation? How rich do we want to be, and what are we willing to do to get there?
He makes some really
yeah.
weird choices, like that don't even really seem to help him. And it seems almost
Where
like a
is he?
green card marriage. Like, why are they married? Like, what happened there? Like, what? Like, it's so confusing.
Well, to me, it
And,
felt
and
like
they're speaking, what, Dutch or Swedish?
I don't even know.
Danish. He might speak a bit of Swedish, but one of the final lines to Elliot is in Danish, where I think she says, "If you've done anything to him, I'll kill you." That was the translation. But yeah, she's a very formidable character. I think the marriage is almost like a Game of Thrones marriage, where they're almost like political alliance and they're using each other to further their ambitions.
But there's still, like, tenderness and love, seemingly.
Yeah.
You
But
know?
that's the sort of attraction.
Except
power.
when she's like,
Like
do this shit or you're done. We're done. Which she doesn't seem to mean mostly, but like, she's kind of harsh.
But they're attracted to each other because they're both powerful, intelligent beings. I really like the wife. It's very Lady Macbeth.
Yes.
And
That's a good call, yeah.
And just the way the camera shoots her is so haunting because, like, just her beauty and her mannerisms are almost alien. Like, the way she's looking at Elliot in that final scene is just like it zooms in on her green eyes and they're just peering into his soul and he's getting really nervous. Like, I don't know what's going on here. And he's like backing away. Like, she's just like a force of nature. She's like the true power in that relationship, pulling the strings.
It kind of helps that we've never really seen her in like anything.
Yeah.
Like, so she's mysterious as a character and kind of an unknown actress at the same time.
And, like, she's off-puttingly beautiful, and then she has this, like, perceived power. Like, when you said, like, looking into her eyes, that's really like a Tywin Lannister thing. Like, he could turn a man's bowels to water with a look. That's, like, her look.
Just piercing, yeah. It's like so alluring and sort of terrifying at the same time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, like she's just sort of playing with people like a cat plays with a mouse, because she's sort of amused with Elliot because she knows she could like devour him at any time or something like that. I mean, she can't actually do it, but just the machinations of her mind are so sort of far ahead of everyone else. What did you think? Yeah, what did you think about the fact that they were foreigners? They were Swedish and Danish rather than Americans. Was that trying to say something about the American dream, people coming from other countries to pursue this American dream, and how potentially dangerous and rotten that strive for wealth above all could be?
Never
Maybe.
thought of it.
I just was like, I want to know what the story is here. Like,
Right.
Well, because
it was very confusing, and like maybe that was the only point, or maybe there is more of a message to it.
yeah, I'm sure we'll learn a bit more about them, but that's a thing. Like a lot of America's populations are immigrants who have come there to pursue this dream of liberty and freedom, and the fact that they're not bound by feudalism or aristocratic classism and all that. Anyone can rise to the top, but the inverse of that is that if you're on the bottom, you're treated like scum, which is how a lot of these characters treat the people at the bottom.
But maybe even he's sort of at the bottom of his kind of executive rung. We see the way he gets treated.
Right.
Like he's young, and maybe he is an immigrant. Maybe there's stuff we don't know about him that sort of places him into a category where they're like, because immigrants are also very much looked down upon in a lot of places in the world. Even though like in the U.S., our country was built on immigrants, and what it takes to immigrate. Like you have to be, you're kind of the cream of the crop already, sort of whatever your level is of society, but people don't necessarily view them that way. So maybe that plays into why he, and him just being a general creep, maybe that helps play into why he couldn't rise.
Yeah, he definitely could have played it better. His sort of smarminess obviously put off a lot of other executives who he could have been more charming, I guess. His ambition was too sort of naked and worn on his sleeve. It felt almost threatening to people above him. Sorry? Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Where is he?
Where has he disappeared to, and who is knocking on the door at the end of the episode?
Yeah, it was just really interesting that he didn't go back to his wife. I don't know, maybe he's like Littlefinger. He wants to be king of the ashes.
Yeah, that is, again, it's that subverting our expectations. We've been waiting for this showdown between Elliot and Tyrell for the whole season, and when finally it's about to happen, the episode ends, and when we pick up, 3 days have passed, and Elliot remembers nothing, and he's chasing the Invisible Man again. But I'm sure we'll find out what happens next. Do you guys have any theories on who might be knocking on the door? I've heard people have thought maybe the police, if the therapist's boyfriend got onto them, because his only block is the fact that Estonia has all of the proxy details, and short of Estonia falling, he can't get those details. But as we see, Estonia has fallen into economic turmoil, so maybe he's gotten that. But I can't think of anyone else. Maybe the drug dealer boyfriend? I don't know. Probably not. He wouldn't come back.
Maybe, but yeah, why would?
Yeah.
It has to be someone. It has to be someone who knows he's there, or at least knows that's where he lives.
Yeah.
It could be the police, but I feel like that'd be a hard thing to kind of write out to keep the season going. If it's like the police are like, we're arresting you for this thing, like, there'd have to be some quick loophole of like, oh, it doesn't stick because everything's been deleted or something. I don't know.
Well, he could go to prison, and the idea of him
season 2 in prison.
I guess we'll see. That's the fun bit. We literally have no idea what's going to happen next.
Right.
That's the allure
and I hope
of
the
the
writers do, though.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, the creator said this was originally going to be a movie, so he has pretty much the broad strokes worked out. And the first season is pretty much the first act of the movie, so I guess we can assume it's a 3-season story, which is comforting. It's comforting that he has an end in mind.
Yeah, like when like the Lost guys like wrote it for 5 seasons and it went longer and was like, oh no.
Add more polar-bears.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see who's at the door, how the world looks.
Yeah, this is sort of the season 2 is potentially the sequel to Fight Club. What happens after the world has collapsed? Just quickly, what did you guys make of Tyrell's relationship with Elliot? Because throughout the whole season, he is strangely drawn to him, even though he's from a lower class, and generally Tyrell sort of despises people of the lower class, but he's impressed with his technical abilities, and he sees that there is this immense power in that, and he is attracted to power.
I think it was more curiosity because, like, they seem pretty technically even. Maybe Elliot has more ability, but he doesn't have that drive for the power that, Tyrell has. So, like, maybe it's like, you have, like, all the instruments to get where I want to be. Why aren't you even interested?
Yeah, and I guess it's a mutual curiosity because Elliot tries to find out about Tyrell, and it all seems too easy, and he thinks, oh no, what if he expect me to do this? What if he's hacking me right now? And he throws his computer chip into the microwave and burns it.
I mean, like I said early on, I thought maybe that he had just sort of figured it all out kind of quickly, or he was on to what was going down because he singled him out so quickly. But it could just be it's like it's sort of like holding up a mirror, and yeah, maybe he sees a lot of himself, I don't know, different circumstances sort of thing.
Okay. Any more to say on Tyrell?
He looks like Hitler's wet dream.
Yeah, the Ubermensch.
Yeah.
Did you guys have any thoughts on Darlene?
Yes.
How did the
Moving on.
season? How did the season go on so long without her being like, "Hey, bro"? Like,
Right.
I mean, I guess they were sort of estranged. Like, not really. She had been gone for a little while,
Yeah.
but you didn't pick up that dynamic. But maybe that's partially to blame. Like, Elliot's character is partially to blame for that. Like, number one, not knowing, and then just the way he is, and she was just in a different mode. Maybe, I don't know. Like, cause she wasn't in on the Mr. Robot stuff. Like, but she seems to sort of understand that he has those issues, but she wasn't like an active participant in that
Right.
person's plans right now. She was dealing with Elliot.
Right. But she seemed to know, okay, where are you right now? Where do you think we are? Like, maybe he's had like psychotic lapses before. It would seem that way because that's why he's in therapy, right?
If she's like, "Hey, have you forgotten me again?" Wouldn't you be like, "Hey, bro, remember, bro"? Like, wouldn't you just like drop that all the time just to be like, "You haven't forgotten, right?"
Right.
I don't know.
It does, yeah, it does really change the way you see her throughout the season, though, because at the beginning I found her really annoying. Just the way she bullied Elliot and just turns up at his house demanding things and using his shower. And it seems like they were playing on that sort of manic pixie dream girl thing where she's just like this free spirit, but it just came off as obnoxious. But like Angela, yeah, I really came to like her in the end, and I think it does completely change their relationship. I guess, yeah, she should have been more insistent on who she was if she knew he had problems with reality, but their relationship is very sort of brother and sister. Like, they just kind of crash at each other's places and they make fun of each other and all that, but Elliot just has no clue what's going on. But
Yeah,
it's
and
interesting to rewatch the season and see how that dynamic is now that we know.
Right.
that's what I'm thinking. Because until the reveal, you're not looking at that. I'm looking at I'm like, oh well, she's not going to hook up with this guy. But yeah, she's kind of a dick, and she's just like running all over him. I'm like, there must be something more going on, and because I assume the whole time that he, like in Fight Club, where the Tyler Durden's talking to Edward Norton's character, and it's like, yeah, don't talk about me, bro. And she's like, and she comes down and it's like, oh, hey, last night was crazy, just like sort of talking like, and he's like, what the fuck? And then like, but to her, it's like, well, I'm continuing a conversation you don't remember. Like, she doesn't know any better. So there's probably, I just assumed that's what was going on. Like, maybe something else was happening with them, or like maybe they did hook up here and there, or maybe, they certainly were working together more and planning more. Like that was obvious.
Yeah, so Darlene seems to be the one that's way more gung-ho about F-Society than Elliot, because Elliot's always, like, doubting it. Like, Mr. Robot is trying to convince him, and he's on the fence about it. Should I do it? Should I do it? The world is a messed up place. Maybe we should try and do this thing. But Darlene's really gung-ho about it.
Yeah, she definitely is more like, by any means necessary, let's bring down Evil Corp.
Yeah. And in the final episode, Darlene's the one that's like celebrating. It's like, why aren't you guys happy? We've got a party. We've saved the world. We've freed all these people. And the rest of F Society are like, yeah, I guess. What do we do
freeing
now?
the dogs and like.
Yeah, I love that scene.
Yeah, that was, and that's one other thing we should probably talk about, a bit more, is just the cold opens are done really well. Just the way everything's shot, it's very engaging.
Yeah, it's
like
great.
It pulls your eye to the right things.
Definitely, yeah.
The soundtrack is great. Like,
I do want to, we'll do a section at the end for that, just to mention some of the great shots and some of the great smash cuts to the title, which is sort of iconic at this point. The scene with freeing the dogs, to me, that was like echoes what they've done with F Society. It's like, yeah, you freed these dogs, but what are they going to do now? They're just going to live on the street and be captured again.
Yeah,
so
they're going to be killed either way. Like,
yeah, so there is this sort of hollowness to the revolution and this sort of almost this superficiality to the anarchist movement, because I was like, yeah, it's okay, yeah, it's easy to destroy something, but what are you going to put in its place? How are you going to make things better?
And I think that could be a very interesting story about, like, okay, so we destroyed it, and now we never realized how much, like, we relied on it, so we want it back. Like,
yeah,
give us back our Starbucks,
Maybe that'll be the new sort of class warfare, the war between people who want to hang on to the system and people who want to get rid of it, which is kind of the theme in The Matrix. People who don't want to give up the Matrix because it's a far better life. Ignorance is bliss. Numbness to what's really going on is preferred.
Right. And if you could buy your coffee on your credit card, the world is good. If all of a sudden you don't have a bank account anymore, you can't even get cash. Like, how are you going to purchase goods and services?
Like, you almost don't exist.
And one of the dangers that Fight Club, again, we're going to bring up Fight Club every 2 minutes, but one of the dangers that Fight Club introduces is this idea that power is a vacuum. If you tear down one leader, a new leader comes in, and that's Tyler Durden. He becomes this fascist figure, and he has this leagues of mindless automaton robots under him.
Right.
Maybe that's the danger, that destroying the corporations, maybe Elliot or Darlene becomes this new sort of fascist ruler, and it just things become worse than ever because you need someone in charge, I guess, and people have a desire to be told what to do.
Right. And I mean, that's why, like, you figure, like, we've evolved through, like, every kind of social structure up to this point, so what do we go back to? Like, warlords and feudalism? Is that different from corporations?
Man, you don't question Project Mayhem.
It's the first rule.
That and Bob has bitch tits.
That too, yeah, that's their second rule. One of the things I found really interesting by the end of the season is the fact that it's the male characters who have sort of collapsed and failed and self-combusted, because Elliot has fallen back under Mr. Robot's control, and Tyrell, once the great Ubermensch of the series, has disappeared from the show. He's gone. He's gotten fired, he's lost his wife, and he's disappeared. Whereas now it's Darlene and Angela who are in these far greater positions of power, upper echelon positions of these two opposing factions, F-Society and Evil Corp. And it seems to be shifting more to their perspective of how these things are going. So I thought it might be cool to see these two women maybe become enemies in the future, representing these two sort of opposing factions.
That's interesting.
If Angela does get corrupted by the thing, and maybe she thinks it's altruistic because she's changing things, she's reforming the company, but she ultimately still believes it needs to be in control for society to run, and Darlene is so gung-ho about tearing it down. That could be an interesting dynamic between those two characters, and you've never really seen two females sort of square off in that way.
No, true. I mean, like, they could go a bunch of different directions.
They could, yeah.
And
literally go anywhere.
I don't think they'd ever become adversaries per se, but have like differing viewpoints. Like, she's like, Evil Corp killed my mother and I'm trying to change it from within, and it's more like Evil Corp's the problem, not like the people running it. Yep. Like, it'll corrupt everyone, kind of like Professor X Magneto kind of thing, where it's just like they want almost the same thing but like very two different ideologies.
Yeah, I like that. That's a cool comparison. Okay, did you guys have any thoughts on Shayla and the whole drug dealer subplot? Because it is fairly peripheral, and I thought it was a bit of a byproduct of it being a movie script originally and then being sort of fleshed out into a TV show. But generally, yeah, I really liked Shayla, and the whole plot contained some of my favorite moments in the show, like the prison break.
See, to me, I thought that the whole thing with her boyfriend, the drug dealer, was maybe like one of the weakest parts of the season until that episode.
Yeah.
Right. But I like how she almost accepts Elliot as he is and knows that, like, whatever, like, he's a nice, smart guy who needs drugs, and she provides it to him. And I'm sure she deals to a bunch of, like, big scumbags like you see at the
like
heroin
major
party.
tweakers.
Yeah.
And he's like, I want Suboxone. Like, I want, like, which is like a whole other thing that's pretty addictive. But it's like he's trying to, he thinks he's maintaining, he thinks he's keeping himself,
right. If he does
clean,
8 milligrams, he can't get addicted or something like that.
Yeah, well, the whole drug addiction, I guess, it sort of gets wrapped up halfway through. But it is interesting because it's almost like Elliot treats his body like a machine. Like, he can manipulate his body chemistry through drugs the way you can manipulate a computer or something.
Overclock it.
Yeah, so it's almost like he's objectifying himself in that way. And that is how he comes into contact with Shayla. But I thought she was really important, at least for Elliot's like character development, because she has so much humanity. And Elliot is so attracted to that humanity. As much as he's afraid of it, he really tries to reach out and connect with her. And there's a great scene where, she says, "You don't know anything about me." And he thinks, "I know everything about you." And she almost interrupts his thought by saying, "No, I don't mean what you've learned on a computer. I mean who I am really." So it's almost like that was the closest he was coming to escaping that anxiety and all that the world can't be viewed through computer screens, and people are more than that. And you really have to try and connect with them in a like face-to-face basis, I guess. And yeah, so that was nice, but it all got cut off at the heels, I guess.
Yeah, literally.
or the throat, yeah.
Yeah, that was really sad. I was like,
that was brutal.
oh no.
It was she was so nice. I loved her. And just the brutality of it, like the whole episode is rendered futile. Like none of it mattered. All your efforts were in vain. She was already dead the whole time. Like that is such a
But like I
thief.
said before, he goes to battle for people he's loyal to.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, so he will do this fucked up thing and release a bunch of prisoners, including this one, abusive drug dealer.
Nah, bro. She was with him the whole time.
Ugh, so creepy.
Ah, yeah. Just are we even going to talk about that character? Because I mean, he was a perfect like fucking psychopath. Like,
Yeah.
And he was he was like you're the badass hacker, but you can't deal with everything.
a lot of things get dealt with a gun and a knife rather than a computer.
Yeah, and there was such an implicit threat in that scene because, you can fight Evil Corp and it's this abstract thing and you're hacking them through computers and maybe they'll figure out who you are and track you down and put you in prison. But this is literally a scene where this guy has a gun. He's practically naked. He's crazy high and he's threatening you and your girlfriend's in a room and you have no idea what state she's in. Like, that's pure tension, that scene. It doesn't matter how good of a hacker you are. You can't stop a bullet. You can't hack a bullet.
Unless you are Neo.
That's true. Unless you're Neo. And I did want to just mention that. Yeah, just that final scene in episode 6, I think it was, where he opens the trunk, is just this one long take where he opens the boot and you don't actually see the body, and the camera just sort of zooms around his face, and Rami Malek's just got this, like, all these pained expression on his face, and in the background you just see the lights and the sirens of the prison, and the prison is just sort of fleeing chaotically into the night, and then it slowly pans back down to Shayla's cut throat, and it's like, just an amazing shot. Related to the drug thing, there is this whole drug detox hallucination dream in episode 4, I think. Did you guys have any thoughts on that?
That's where he's in the motel room?
Yeah, so it's before they try and invade Steel Mountain, and he needs to get off drugs because he's like vomiting and he can't hold himself together because he's had his last hit.
Right, his withdrawal, like...
And he says, like, he needs to...
dream.
Yeah, so he's in his bed, Mr. Robot's sort of taking care of him, and he's like, I need to get a hit to do this. So they go to this, like, crack house, and then he gets, like, shot, and then he wakes up and he's in this dream world, and he's just sort of wandering. It seems like he's wandering through his, like, childhood street, and he comes to a sign, it says, like, 404,
error.
Yeah, it's using all this, like, computer iconography. And if I remember, he actually comes across, like, a little girl, and I might be wrong, but I was wondering if that might be like the nod that Darlene is his sister or something. I don't know, like that was his sister that he'd blocked out.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. But it's a really, like, that's always a really dangerous thing to put into a show because it is such this blurring of reality and fantasy, and it's like, it really turns viewers off because it's like, well, what's even real? Like, I don't like this. I want to go back to the real world and get back into the story. This is this sort of weird artsy detour. But I didn't think it went on too long, and I just really liked it from that. His body chemistry is so out of whack, so I think it was really effective from that point of view. And obviously all the nods we get to there being this undercurrent of truth to his reality. And
just like his whole detox thing, and then you find out like Mr. Robot wasn't real, and obviously he wasn't shot. So like, what was that party? Was that like a fever dream kind of thing?
He never left the bed. That was all the dream.
Right.
He never left the bed. Yeah.
Right, but like you're watching it and it's like, holy shit! Like that girl just got shot in the chest. Like it was just really weird.
It was, yeah. But some great little breaking of the fourth wall in that sequence where he turns to the camera and he's like, "But first, a word from our corporate overlords," and it cuts to the commercial break.
Yeah.
So that was nice. Okay. Do we want to talk about Mr. Robot himself, who is a character, sort of? I mean, he's not real, but he obviously, is a big character in the show, played by Christian Slater, so he's like the star. He's got that star appeal, I guess. An older star, obviously, but still.
He has his own plans and ambitions and stuff, kind of, like his own persona, but
he's a separate entity, even if he doesn't actually have a body of his own. But yeah, he's obviously very inspired by Tyler Durden. He's slick and self-assured, and he's brimming with determination, and he dips into this very ruthless sort of utilitarian philosophy about his goals. And I guess here's sort of what Elliot wants to be. You know, he's confident. He can talk to people. He's not anxious. He doesn't close in. He's a very extroverted person. Unlike Tyler Durden, though, I think he's not so much a friend as he is a father figure, which is something that Elliot deeply desires. He feels like that's missing in his life.
And who he actually is.
And who he is, yeah. Well, that's the manifestation of his subconscious. He desires this father figure, so he brought it into reality. So, I don't know, did you guys like him? Did you like Christian Slater's performance?
It's nice to see Christian Slater getting work, like I said earlier. Like I've, when I see him and stuff, I like him, and he's had a couple of shows on that like I watched a few episodes of, and I was like, that seems interesting. And then a month later, it's like canceled, or a week later, it's like canceled, and you're like, man, in the '90s, he was in everything, kind of, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe he sort of figured out the formula here. Is they used him to promote this a bit. But like he's mostly he does background work on this really, and I think it plays really well. Like his scenes are great, but I wonder how much we're gonna see of him next season.
Well, he's struck gold with Mr. Robot because it's become a bit of a phenomenon. I think he'll have a big role. I mean, the end of this season is him making Elliot submit to him and saying, "No, I'm going to tell you what to do." Elliot's like, "What do I do? Tell me what to do." And he says, "We'll always be a part of you. This is what you're going to do." So I think he's going to be around for a while yet. But I liked him. He's obviously cartoonish and larger than life with his sunglasses and his carnival abode and his homeless person disguise. But I think that works in with that sort of... Obviously, he's not a real thing. He's a figment of Elliot's imagination.
His name tag.
I really liked him. And actually, Nerdist just had a podcast with him and Remy Malek. Obviously, like you said, Adam, like his name draws attraction to it because it's like, oh, what's he doing now? But I think he really crushed the role. Like, it was, again, redundant, but it was really well written. You believed him so much that he was an actual person there,
Yeah. And
when it turns out that he was just, a part of this psychosis, it really was like, whoa, how? Like when you see him like talking to the hacker in fsociety, and he's like breaking all his shit. Like he's like, "What are you gonna do? Like put pot and cream for the rest of your life, or do you want to do like something real?" I thought that was like a great scene, and on both actors' parts.
Yeah, it was, and I know a lot of people don't like Christian Slater because he's like perpetually sort of sarcastic and chews the scenery, but I think those characteristics work really well for Mr. Robot because he affects this sort of artificial coolness, like he's this Tyler Durden sort of cartoony, larger-than-life character. But I also think there are a few moments where he's sort of comforting Elliot, there is a bit of warmth there and a bit of like fatherly warmth there, which I thought were good. Like when he's saying, "It's okay, kid, I'll look after you," when he's detoxing.
So speaking of fatherly warmth, what happened with the window? Like, did Elliot actually push his father out the window, or did his father push him out the window?
No, I think he pushed himself out because he was so like racked with guilt over telling his mother about the leukemia, and then he did it again in the same house. Like he was like replaying that.
Right.
Act.
I got it that they were replaying it, but
yeah.
I didn't get who actually threw who out.
Well, that's just what I thought. It could be something else. That's just what I got. I heard a theory that like going back to the 90s nostalgia and how Elliot sees everything through pop culture references, that Christian Slater. He's just appropriated the actor Christian Slater. Like his father looked nothing like Christian Slater, but he's just taken him from 90s movies and used him as the father figure.
Nice.
which I like.
Yeah, but yeah. I mean, I guess it's still Elliot's memory because I was going to say when they went, flashed back to Mr. Robot's story, it was Christian Slater. But yeah, getting him or like one of the other Brat Packs and like Anthony Michael Hall would be his father.
Him going to see like Pulp Fiction, that kind of breaks the fourth wall because don't Pulp Fiction and True Romance share the same universe? And he was in True Romance.
Oh, do they?
I think so.
They all kind of loosely do. Like,
I'm trying to think if they share characters.
It's not like they're the Avengers.
No. Yeah, so the scene I mentioned before, the one that just doesn't... Like, I can accept most of the scenes where he's either... he's like Elliot's projecting into him and he's addressing the fsociety, or he's in the background and no one's acknowledging him, so he's not there. And, that scene with Romero where he's telling him, I'm crazy. Don't you know I'm crazy by now? Like, that's just Elliot.
Right.
But the one scene I don't get is where Tyrell and Mr. Robot are sitting in a car, and Tyrell mentions like his dirty little secret, and like I have no idea what's being discussed here, and I also don't know how, because it can't be Elliot, can it, that he's addressing, because
Right.
they've only interacted a few times, and every time like Tyrell is surprised to see Elliot. Like the time when at the end when he comes to the apartment, like they don't know each other. He's just turned up at his apartment. But in that scene with him and Mr. Robot, they've had many conversations and they seem like very familiar with each other. So I have no idea who that is that Tyrell is talking to.
Do you think that maybe him and Tyrell had hooked up like before the season to orchestrate this whole thing?
But like when Tyrell gets to the arcade, he's like surprised. He's like, "What did you hope to achieve here?" So it seems like, yeah, I don't think so. There's something else going on. Like I hope they address that, because I hope that wasn't just a red herring. Any thoughts on any of the other characters in F Society?
The Muslim girl, Darlene wakes up like early in the morning, and she's doing her call to prayer.
Yeah.
Like those little things, like she may have had like half a dozen lines the entire series, but like her character I'm very interested in, just because obviously she's a devout Muslim, but she's also in this hacker society. Like, so what brought her into F Society? I think that would be really interesting for season 2 to see like what brought all these people into F Society.
Yeah, because we don't really get much backstory with them. They're all just there. They're working towards a common mission, but there isn't necessarily a lot of camaraderie between them. The closest you get is Darlene and that Muslim girl, who I can't find the name of, because they do a mission together and they're sort of talking. But yeah, it'll be nice to see find out some of the backstories of why they're doing this, and it does seem to be like different members of society that might have been sort of ostracized or victimized by the current system, like a Muslim person, a black person.
Well, a Muslim woman,
And you compare that, like, they're obviously look different, come from different backgrounds, but you compare that to the halls of Evil Corp, where it's all of these, uniformed men walking in unison. They're literally just black silhouettes in one scene. Like, they're all just the same automatons. So I guess it's breaking up that conformity and saying, there's actually lots of different people in the world, and maybe they should be represented, or maybe they should have a say in how the world is run, something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
I did like the scene where they're like watching hackers and they're just mocking the way like hacking has been represented in movies.
Right. And meanwhile, like Darlene is Angelina Jolie in Hackers, right?
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, there was a bit of the the Hollywood hacking type boom, something crazy happens, but they tried to explain most of it. Like,
well, the show has been praised by some sort of technical people for being at least way more realistic than most shows, like CSI, where it's just enhance image every episode.
Yeah.
Rather than relying on, most hacker movies are like, we've got to break through the firewall, we've got to get into the mainframe. It's more of these sort of simple infections like email phishing and getting malware onto a computer and things like that. So it's a bit more realistic and relatable to the everyday sort of dangers of going on the internet than actual, this elite hacker team trying to break into the Pentagon or something. It's more everyday people and the vulnerabilities that they are subjected to.
Yeah, I really like that part where the cop is like opened up something. It's like, you have a gift card to like Starbucks or something, and it's like malware detected.
No. But like the hilarious part is like he's stupid enough to put the thumb drive in, but he immediately is like, oh shit, and like starts like ripping stuff out and like.
Yeah, like he rips the motherboard out all of a sudden. It's like, what?
A little excessive, just cut the cords. And
what's interesting is a lot of Elliot's hacking is fairly rudimentary. Like he's just basically looking for information that's freely available online that people have actually put out there.
Right.
On like
that he doesn't he's not Facebook friends with his therapist, but
yeah.
Some of it is mostly just cyber stalking, but yeah, he figures out passwords, and he that doesn't necessarily involve hacking, but
yeah. So it's
like some of it he's just like their password's password,
right. Or their password is their dog's name, or like he reads people, and it's like, oh, they must care about this. Maybe it's like this is their password.
Yeah, it shows how a lot of the victims of online crime are that because they simply share too much online, and maybe that's all of us. We're just sharing way too much of our life and our private files and our
Often unknowingly.
Unknowingly, yeah. Often, we register for something because we have to, because you have to register for every website you go
Right.
to, and suddenly
And
that
you accept the
information is
terms and
online,
conditions because you never read them.
which can be
Like-
anything. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I've sold myself into slavery like 5 times.
yeah. No, I saw a tweet where a guy was like, "Oh, damn, iTunes has just updated their terms and condition, and my lawyer's on holiday."
There's got to be. I think someday maybe it'll reach critical mass because they keep putting in more, and that's part of what this whole thing is about. Kind of, they keep
Yeah.
putting in more and more stuff. Like every company after Sony did it was like they put in the can't sue me clause. Like you have to agree to arbitration, which is basically like go to our own private court and get found in our favor. Like little things
Right.
like that. You're like, well, but in order just to use your service, and the fact that it's well known that no one reads these things, no one's really signing them. Like someday there's going to be some landmark case where they're like, you can't do that anymore, and here's what you
Right.
can put in there, and here's what you can't. And like right now, it's the internet is still a bit of the Wild West, not as much as it was. It's starting to the regulations are coming down a bit, but
that
someday
goes-
that's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely, and that just goes back to again that bombardment of information. We simply cannot absorb all of this, so we simply just arbitrarily agree to it and say, "Yep, okay, I submit to it," and we don't know what we're submitting to. We don't know how much we're giving up and how much we're letting some other company run our lives or have access to our lives.
Yeah. I mean, like, I find it really weird that I will go, like, I recently bought a blazer online, and all of a sudden my whole, like, Facebook feed is, like, the same blazer on sale at Macy's.
Yeah.
I'm like, stop. Like, oh, how do they know? Like,
We
they
noticed
said
you
it's
like this
like-
blazer. Would you like to buy it 100 more
Facebook
times?
Beacon and
Yeah.
it's Google and it's Facebook and it's Amazon, and in some ways it's nice. Like when I go on Amazon and I'm like, oh yeah, I was looking for that, or like, but I'm not like the person that just like, oh, I'm just gonna buy that shit or whatever,
Yeah.
right? But then when I go on Facebook and I was looking at something on my phone, there's things that me and my wife, I'm like, I'm pretty sure we talked about it and I never typed it in or went to a site, and all of a sudden they're like, do you want diapers or do you want wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, where are you
Yeah.
getting the information for this? Like, is this thing recording me? Like, I want to pull the battery out of my phone and like chuck it sometimes. Like,
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like online stores and even department stores will cater catalogs and advertising depending on what you buy. And I think there was a famous example where a woman started buying certain food and they sent her pregnancy pamphlets, pregnancy catalogs, and things like that. 'cause
and
they
she didn't
figured out
even know.
She didn't even know she was pregnant, but they did, based on a.
Oh, wow.
Some
some
algorithm that
some
says like,
algorithm,
this
yeah.
is what pregnant people are into. All of
Yeah.
a sudden they're buying
Huh.
spicy stuff and they need larger pants or like whatever it is.
So we are being sort of deconstructed by technology and advertised to, and yeah, just ones and zeros, I guess, in some database.
I mean, last week my girlfriend got messages from Facebook it was like on the side where they do the stacked advertisements. One was like engagement rings, and the other one was Weight Watchers.
Oh no.
And she's like, "Fuck you."
Facebook's trolling her.
Yeah.
One little fun fact I heard from like the technical consultant on the show, some tech geeks were criticizing the show because apparently an IP address appears on screen that has extra digits, and it was like, oh, this show is supposed to be all realistic, but that's such an easy mistake.
Legal reasons.
Yeah, but the reason was that they couldn't show an IP address that actually existed, which is really funny to me because it's almost like the 555 phone number that Hollywoodland uses in all their shows. Every time someone
And everyone buys it.
time someone says a phone number on TV or movies, they say 555, and now they're doing that with IP addresses. So we've moved into a different era of
Well, I think because there was a whole article I was reading, like if they use, for instance, like if they're on a show and they talk about Facebook or whatever, like they're allowed to do that in a certain context, but most networks don't really like that. So, for instance, like you ever watch episodes of Law and Order, and they're like, he's on like adult book face like all these, they have to come up with all these websites, right, for like where their cases start or what they do, and every single website has to be real and has to be owned by those companies.
yeah.
And so in the case of, I think it was like Law and Order SVU and shows like that, they have like pervy websites, and so like the companies didn't want to like have them in their own name. So there's like this one employee at NBC, Bob whatever, has like 800 and whatever dirty websites registered under his name because like NBC doesn't want to be connected to them, but they have to own them so that no one else can, so it's not a real thing.
That's funny.
I think the Good Wife does that a lot. They'd have like Chum Hum instead of Google, and Chum Hum, like the owner of Chum Hum, is actually a character in the show, and they're always like butting heads with him. It's like their biggest client. My favorite is always like Bing. Whenever Bing gets mentioned on a movie, I'm binging it. It's like, yeah, that's a fictional brand if ever I heard one.
No, it's real.
Yeah, I know. No one uses
But
it, so it's basically
Yeah, but no one
it
uses it.
doesn't seem real. But it's like that's the thing I always remember when Bing was coming out and they were just like bombarding you with advertisement, Bing this, Bing that. Microsoft is like, you want Bing. And it was like, I think Hawaii Five-0 was a brand new show, like the new one. And I remember I was like 2 or 3 episodes in and they're at a party and they were asking some question and the guy was, it's where you'd be like, man, Google that, or hey, search that. And he was like, oh, Bing it. And I'm like, no one watching this has ever heard of Bing.
Ask Jeeves.
Yeah. It was basically like saying something like, like completely made up, but it's a real thing. It's like a horrible product placement. It's like as if he was like, Bing it while I drink this Coca-Cola. So refreshing. Like, oh my gosh.
I did want to mention the final scene of the season, which is post-credits, Avengers style, and it's this big estate where all of these rich, powerful people are going, and you see Price, the CEO of Evil Corp, and also another character, White Rose, who we saw in an earlier scene dressed up in drag, and now he's dressed up as a businessman, and it's played by B.D.
Just
Wong.
a respectable-looking guy.
Yeah, and he sits down next to Price, and they start talking, and they obviously have a business relationship.
Ooh, so much.
Also,
much
White Rose in
that
drag
scene.
was so good.
That was great, yeah.
That scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, he hacks time. That's what he said.
So yeah, the very last scene was like I was almost expecting like an Eyes Wide Shut kind of thing.
Yeah.
to happen. It was just so elaborate, it just exuded like power and wealth.
Exactly, yeah. It was like ancient Greek temple or something.
You would think that people like that would be at home or something. They'd be gathering all the resources they can, and they're like, I want to make sure I have... Like, if we were in a situation and we think, like, society's going to shit, and we had unlimited resources, like, what would we do? Like, weapons and food and, like, a secure place and, like, just make sure I'm taken care of. And they're just like, we're going to this party. It'll be all right.
I guess, that's how they unwind, I guess, because they have such stressful jobs, and then they go and just listen to harp music and get served, like, the most expensive wine in the world, and I guess do deals there. So
and they know who did it. They're not worried,
They have their own hacker group, which is apparently the best in the world with the Chinese and White Rose. Like,
do you reckon that's what it is? Well, I wasn't sure if they were in league or like White Rose was actually working against them, or what the deal was.
I think they're in league.
Okay,
interesting. And I really think that happens in like real life, where every now and then like Target gets hacked. I'm sure like Walmart or something like hired a bunch of hackers to be like, please hack our competitors. I think that's just part of like doing business now.
To me it seemed kind of an adversarial relationship, almost the way they were talking. Like, like these are people that are they work together, but they also compete, and they were kind of getting together, like, to compare notes, sort of. But I don't know. I mean, like, if they were working together, why would they let this go down in the first place?
Yeah, I read it as like White Rose is some business leader, but he also has like a second life as a hacker, and he just does it for fun and maybe to get power in different ways. But I also think it's like he sees the world is changing, like the old guard, the old establishment of corporations may not be on as firm ground as they once were, and that's kind of the final line of the episode where he's watching the harp be played, and he compares it to Emperor Nero playing the harp as Rome burned, and you see just the fire crackling behind him and washing over his face, and he just kind of smirks, and he's like, this is actually crumbling, and I'm switching alliances to this new order, something like that. Like, maybe that's why that was the conflict with White Rose, whether he should back fsociety, whether they had what it took to bring down possibly his competitor in Evil Corp. So maybe it is just his self-interest, he wants to undermine his competitor, or whether he sees them as a new order that he can use to his advantage. But maybe. I do like this new level of characters, like these sort of Greek gods that are making wheeling and dealing above all of the carnage. That's cool. Hope we see more of that.
Well, I mean, like, was a movie about Lehman Brothers crash. There are these like huge power brokers, like they exist, and we try to like think of them maybe not as people, but like, you know, like the Bernie Madoffs are just like ripping people off and like taking billions, like unimaginable amounts of money. Like, you know, the Enron guys, like he had a fucking like $12,000 like umbrella stand. Like, you know, it's just like a stupid amount of wealth. Like that,
but it's not even the excess of
But it
what
trickles
they
down,
have.
Matt. It trickles down.
It's and I mean, like,
right,
I'm not.
Reagan.
It funds the umbrella stand economy.
I'm a capitalist and everything. I'm not about like redistribution or anything, but it's not just like the excess of what they have. Like, you can have the $1 billion, accounts and jets and all that, but then like it's just like, oh, I just keep everything else for myself too. Like, there's only so much you can buy at the end of the day, right? So like once you get to a certain point of having the a 10,000, if you have like a $5,000 wine glass, let's say, or something stupid, everything in your house is gold plated. Like, eventually you just can't spend that. So you spend that, buying corporations and doing major things that affect people's lives, right? So it's like, like all of the Walmart heirs just sitting there stacking up money they'll never spend instead of paying employees properly, which wouldn't cost much. Like little things like that. But they're right. But at the same time, you're like, well, if I were in that situation, like, what would I do?
I have a big problem with like just Wild West freelance capitalism, because the capitalism that we currently have is like oligarchy. Like, it's not capitalism. Everything that we do should reflect on the work that we do. Sure, people are going to be paid higher salaries, but a CEO should not be making 400 times their lowest salaried employee. They're not doing that much work. If anything, like, they're on the chopping block. If, like you said, with Volkswagen, no one's going to get arrested or going to prison. So why pay that guy so much money?
Yep.
Yeah,
It's no good.
I'm sorry.
No good. No. I agree. It's could be a podcast on its own, I guess. Do we want to talk about the cinematography at all? Obviously, that was a big draw for me. Just the visual style of the show I found very unique. It wasn't necessarily, for all it cribs off other shows in terms of its writing, I think that the style is really striking, and as soon as you turn it on, it brings you into that world immediately. Any favorite shots or any favorite moments you wanted to mention?
The Ferris wheel shot, like when Mr. Robot and Elliot are first talking.
Yes, that was a great shot, although it was ripped off The Third Man, sort of, which is a Orson Welles movie.
What's The Third Man?
It wasn't exactly the same shot, but there's a famous shot in The Third Man where Orson Welles and another guy are in a Ferris wheel. It goes around, and he's looking down at the people and saying, "Look at all those dots on the ground. Would you really care if I squished one?"
Really?
Yeah, it's a completely different context, but the actual the scene is very. I think it was.
And then he gets his fingers out and goes, "I squish it, I squish it, I squish it."
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
Well, during that shot, I was also concerned that one of the carts in the back would like come crashing into them.
I don't understand. Does Coney Island still run? Is that still do all the rides still work there?
I believe so.
Okay, I thought it was like an abandoned place or something, or maybe
It's
not.
pretty iconic.
No, because they had the hot dog.
Because it just seemed empty, like there was no one there. But yeah, it's definitely a cool shot. Just two people alone on a Ferris wheel just going around. And like the framing of the show is really interesting. Like, you see it in that scene where characters are often on the very bottom of the screen to one side. You actually don't really get a waist up shot or a chest up. It's often just their sort of detached head talking, and there's this huge sort of frame of space around them that's often out of focus. And I was reading an interview with the cinematographer, and he was just talking about how he wanted to convey like the isolation, just this head in an empty frame, and the detachment, and often the weight of the world sort of crushing down on that head for a lot of the characters.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't personally notice that, but like, I think going back to using New York as a background, where like there's just like so much power in the buildings behind the people. Like when the guy shoots himself, like you can see like the skyline of like other high rises,
Yes. Yeah,
like,
definitely.
And you also see it like Harlem, that he pays like nothing on, by nothing I mean like $1,200 a month for. You know, so like he lives in like this really dank like little corner studio thing, but meanwhile he's working with these guys that work on the 80th floor, shit like that, you know.
Yeah, I'm glad they actually got to film in New York instead of Toronto, which is where they usually film for New York. The way it's shot is very different from the way that New York is often shot, where it's like overhead helicopter shots and the skyline and all that. It really gets into these dark, grimy streets, which I think adds a lot to like Elliot's anxiety, because he's always got his shades on, pulling his hoodie tight, and it feels like there's a danger to the world around him. He's sort of threatening him, and he has to get from one enclosed space to the next because he's in danger. And there's a lot of shots inside subways with him sort of hunched amidst all the people, and you do feel that sense of agoraphobia, just sort of people closing in around him, and the discomfort he feels when people touch him. He sort of edges away.
Yeah, personally, like I totally get that. Like I'm kind of agoraphobic myself, and like having to be around big amounts of people, travel like long ways on the T and stuff in Boston, I get a little like, oh, okay, please don't touch me.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, yeah, the buildings themselves are a huge contrast to the streets, which are very dark, and the buildings are humongous and shiny and glossy and impenetrable. And there's a great shot in the first episode where Elliot is being escorted by these two big guys into the Evil Corp skyscraper, and he looks up through the ringed logo and he just sees the tower just protruding up into the heavens. It is almost like this sort of modern castle, or this modern sort of citadel that's lording over the city.
It's like Olympus, you know.
Yeah.
On top of there, all gods.
Yeah, that sense of space and scale conveys like the class sort of divide really well.
And like even with Tyrell's place, just like you can see, and I've been house hunting, so I know like you see like Bosch appliances and stuff like that, and like, you know, really high end everything, even though he's not in like one of these high rise glass condos. Yeah. Like, you know, it just a very different like how people live. And yeah, I mean, again, it's like the 1% versus the people that are getting shit on.
And the notion that the stuff you have, like the items that you have, determine your value.
Oh boy.
Like I was saying earlier, just the general visual style I really enjoyed. There were a lot of really good transition shots, like the one I mentioned earlier when it transitioned to that camera lens, and I thought that like, maybe someone was watching their conversation like from a building or something, and it ended up being we were at Evil Corp. There are a lot of transition shots like that are very seamless and maybe not what they appear at first.
Yeah, the idea of surveillance is also interesting because there's often a sense of paranoia in Elliot that he's constantly being watched and followed, and he keeps seeing these suited men on, you know, the subway or the street. So in many respects, his instinct to follow other people and spy on other people is almost like an attack against that. Like he depends on technology, and he needs technology to understand the world, but in many respects he's afraid of it. You know, he covers his webcams with tape so people can't watch him, and he spies on other people and hacks into their account. You know, he points the sort of buying apparatus outwards so it can't be pointed towards him, sort of.
Yeah, and a lot of that's justified. It's, you know, it would seem.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he also knows the vulnerabilities of it.
And yeah, Coney Island. Yeah, if we sort of mentioned it, but you know, I love the idea of the carnival, just on the very margins of the city, as this sort of allegory for the internet, I guess. You know, this sort of dark carnival that people can just go to and play around and do anything and escape the rigid class structure of the city. And they can, yeah,
it's like the freak show
of. Yeah, the freak show. And it's a place of sort of creativity and trying to create a new world. And yes, silhouettes is another big motif on the show. We get the silhouette of all the men crowded around the table looking at Elliot, and then in the last episode we get that footage of him on the boardwalk. It's just his shadow sort of falling into the surf.
Yeah, so like that was pretty fucked up.
Yeah, it was weird because it was just sort of out of focus, and yeah, I guess it was just a decision that he sort of subconsciously made, like throwing himself out of the window. He was wrestling with his internal psyche, and it manifested itself physically.
Yeah, apparently. Like, yeah, and then he was like shirtless towards the end of the season and had crazy scars. So was that like from the boardwalk or from the window or?
Probably both, yeah. because he was limping a lot after he fell out of the window at the graveyard, so he's probably pretty cut up. Although, did he ever go to the hospital for that? Like, who stitched him up?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, I mean, there's some missing time, right?
Right,
Yeah.
there's
That's true.
missing time everywhere.
There's like always missing time, yeah.
Yep.
Mr. Robot knows the guy. He knows the guy, you know, keeps it on the low.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that is kind of the Tyler Durden thing, where he's asleep. That's when he's Mr. Robot, and Elliot has no control, and it's just Mr. Robot going about his business. So it's really, the personalities have really separated into their own things at this point, where they have sort of autonomy over the body, which is freaky.
So, does anyone have any ideas about the actual show's title besides the storefront? If it means anything else? Like, because he feels like he is the anti-Mr. Robot, like everyone else is robots?
No, I think it's meant to refer to him, like he doesn't feel like a real human, he feels more like a machine, and he sees the world as a machine, and he can't connect to humanity. It's almost like something that, like, other kids would have called him or something, because he was so different. Like, they would have called him Mr. Robot because he's such a weirdo or something like that, or he's obsessed with little computers and all that. It also might refer to the idea of, like, what's the word?
Anthropomorphic.
Yeah, you can't say it either.
Anthropomologic? Something?
Anthropomorphizing.
Anthropomorphic.
Yeah, that's it.
Technology. We combine.
Nailed it.
I'll edit all three attempts into like a coherent word.
Into Adam saying the correct word.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. I think the store is obviously the biggest inspiration because it's the connection to the father figure, and that's like Elliot's main motivation. That's what's missing in him, a father figure to take care of him. And he desires that so much that he produced it from thin air. It also the title kind of evokes, like, you know, internet usernames. Like, rather than using your real name, you use like an alias, like that's
a
your
Valkyrist?
online. Sorry, yeah, like a Valkyrist. Like, that's your online identity. Like, you've left the real world and entered the virtual world, and you sort of create your own identity online. So we're sort of wrapping up. Do you guys have any theories? I mean, we tried to speculate. Do you have any theories on what might happen next in season 2?
Well, it's until something different happens. The knock on the door is a completely new character, or a group of people that have been watching him this whole time and know exactly what's going on, and maybe they're connected to someone else we know.
Ooh, is the knock on the door White Rose?
Oh, maybe not White Rose, but maybe like one of the members of the Dark Army. Yeah.
Evil Corp CEO. He's like, I agree with your mission.
Let's team up.
I've seen the error of my ways.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I like that idea. Like, I like the idea that White Rose sees the way the dynamics are shifting, and he might try and get in contact with. He'll get the Dark Army to contact Elliot, maybe bring him into his confidence.
Do you think there could be some like plot where it's like they actually have more backup somewhere?
Like in China?
Oh, right.
Well, but like, yeah, like, I mean, and CEO didn't seem too concerned, and like, we've discovered a secret backup or something, and like he's just using it to his advantage, or
Yeah, I don't know how Price expects to get out of this. And I wonder if he actually does know that it's Elliot behind it, or whether he just thinks it's Tyrell behind it, because they left on such bad terms and this was the immediate follow-up.
And he's gone, like, as no one's seen him.
And for all we know, he may have been responsible. Maybe Elliot didn't pull the trigger. Maybe it was Tyrell.
Well, they did it together, right?
Yeah, at least, the very least. So.
But like Elliot's saying, we should never have done this.
He?
This was a mistake. Maybe it was like Tyrell who finally. And I thought it might have been Tyrell on the newsfeed, like declaring everyone's free. Like this was his ultimate revenge against Evil Corp.
But the whole thing, like the whole, he loses 3 days or whatever. That's like Mr. Robot, on the controls the whole time, right? Like.
Yeah.
So Elliot wouldn't be resisting, or wouldn't be, this isn't right. Like he'd be full war.
The final guy, like when they zoom in on his mask, doesn't he have green eyes?
Oh no, it's the wife.
Yeah.
Purple eyes. Secret Targaryen.
Yep. Definitely.
Mr. Robot's a Targaryen. Yeah.
Confirmed.
Fire and blood. I had to get rid of the debt so that you would accept me as king.
The Iron Bank.
Faceless men, come on, guys, they're wearing
Faceless
masks.
man, they're wearing masks. It all comes to full circle.
It all connects. Game of Thrones. Circle of life.
Okay. Is there any more to say on Mr. Robot?
No, I don't think so.
Going for a while.
It was a really good fucking show.
It was, yes. You should. I mean, we've spoiled everything, but if you haven't watched it, you should definitely watch it because it still holds up, even if you're spoiled. Anyway, yep, that concludes our review of Mr. Robot's first season. The show has been renewed for a second season, so we can look forward to that next year. Thanks again for joining me, Matt and Adam. And
thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
This has been the Vassals of Kingsgrave, and we'll catch you next time. See ya.
Bye.